I've really enjoyed the time that I've spent with Dead Cells so far, at least a lot more than I thought I was going to at first, and since I'm too lazy to make the Power Rangers video that I've been supposed to make for forever, I'm just gonna waste the next however many minutes of your life talking about this instead, okay? Now, normally I would never make a review on a game that is technically still in development, but I seriously felt that I'd make an exception for Dead Cells, as it is actually more polished than a good deal of finished games that I've played recently, and I've sank my fair share of hours into it and thoroughly enjoyed all of them. Dead Cells is a roguelite, or a roguelike-like Metroidvania action platformer, which immediately caught my eye, as many games of this genre have really been catching my eye lately, especially considering that I find some of them to actually be better than Super Metroid, and I know that's a sin, but cough cough Hollow Knight cough cough. The core gameplay of Dead Cells consists of small platforming elements and killing enemies to collect, well, dead cells. There are a huge variety of weapons and skills that can be obtained in the game, such as swords, bows, shields, spears, grenades, turrets, etc. I could honestly go on about this alone for quite a while, as there really is an impressive variety of ways to slaughter the dungeon dwellers that this game contains. You can also collect power scrolls for any of your 3 stats, those being health, strength, and skills, with health increasing the capacity of your health bar, strength increasing the damage you do with your primary weapons like swords and bows, and skills decreasing skill cooldown and increasing skill damage. There's also a chance that the equipment you pick up will have a stat boost as well. Going back to the dead cell mechanic, dead cells are orbs that drop from enemies that can be turned in at the end of each level to obtain permanent upgrades, such as a larger health flask, damage boost for weapons, and new weapons from blueprints that drop from killing enemies. The thing that makes this mechanic interesting is that, like I said, the upgrades that you obtain with this are permanent, and will remain through all subsequent runs that you do on that save file, and it is for this reason that I define the game as a roguelite, or a roguelike-like, or a procedural death labyrinth, rather than a traditional roguelike as it is often deemed. A better example of a traditional roguelike game would be The Binding of Isaac, which I would include gameplay of, but I don't actually own the game, and sorry? It's a good thing that they include the ability to retain certain things throughout different runs, though, because, trust me, you're gonna die. A lot. And I mean, dead is in the title of the game, so I really don't think you should doubt me on this. Like, seriously, look. Now that I've given you a summary of what the game's all about, I'm going to split the video off into 3 parts, those being gameplay, design, and my conclusion, which will be my overall thoughts of the game in its current state. All of these sections are timestamped in the description if you can watch maybe 1 or 2, but not the others. But if what I've said interests you so far, I strongly recommend you just stop watching the video and experience the game for yourself. The listing price on Steam is usually $16.99, but thanks to the summer sales, it's only $14.44. They plan to raise the price at some point, so you should totally pick it up while it's cheap. And yes, it may be in early access, but it's an addicting, wonderfully polished game that I'd easily recommend to any fan of the genre. So you should seriously go check it out. The first thing that caught me about Dead Cells was its pixel art. I had been watching Vinesauce play, and seeing the way that the game itself plays out, and seeing the stunning visuals, it sold me nearly instantly, and I ended up buying the game. Every area that follows the beginning cells have stunning backgrounds and all look incredibly unique. It's nice that no 2 areas look exactly alike, and no area looks overly dreary. The closest thing we have to 2 identical areas would be the 2 different sewer levels, though they do each have their own bit of charm. The varied backgrounds I saw during my time with the game gave me a very nostalgic feeling, almost reminded me of the beautiful backgrounds of Samurai Jack, all of which you can tell had a lot of care and time put into them. And speaking of that, if you haven't watched Samurai Jack, you're really missing out and you should go watch it. It's amazing and gorgeous. Maybe one day I'll make a video on it. The game's protagonist also looks great and fairly unique. There's a very large variety of different enemy types in the different areas, all of which quite impressive, except for this guy who is definitely not a guardian from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, or this guy who is definitely not like Roadhog from Overwatch. Or this guy, okay? Fuck this guy. Nobody likes this guy. Like, fuck that guy. The game's UI is great and easy to read and understand without much effort. My only complaint in that regard would be the fact that several item tooltips and the statistics guy had spelling errors at the time of me recording footage, though I will cut some slack as the game is in beta and is not yet finished. Unfortunately, I'd say that the weakest aspect of this game's design would be its sound design. It's nothing bad, and I know that it will improve as the game is updated. It's just poor at times. The music, however, while in my opinion not memorable, I do really enjoy the tracks that play, especially Prisoner's Awakening. It gets me kinda pumped listening to it, though it does lead to an issue of it being the only song that I remember from the game when I'm not playing. The gameplay of Dead Cells is definitely the most complex aspect of it. As I previously stated, it's a roguelite action platformer, but it actually has a fairly complex combat system and a very expansive progression system. But before I get into the game's combat, I want to get into more of a basis of what you'll be coming across when you play the game. Obviously, there are generic enemy types, and some of which are easier than others. Just avoid this guy, seriously. But there are also elite enemies that you find after beating the first area. These enemies are incredibly strong, and they also spawn little, for lack of a better word, minions that will also attack you. Once you get the elites themselves to half health, they also teleport, which is incredibly scary, and I hate it. Any enemy can have an elite variety, and you never know what you're going to come across, so just hope that it's not one of the big skeletons with the swords. There are also challenge rooms, which are pretty difficult. You have to beat all the enemies in a room within a certain time without getting hit at all. If you do this, you get a small reward, which in my opinion is not worth it. You can also find assorted chests throughout the game areas that drop weapons, skills, or a bunch of enemies. There are also curse chests that give you a decent item, but also curse you, meaning you need to defeat 10 enemies without being damaged at all. The game also has 2 bosses, but I would rather not spoil them, so you should totally play the game and fight them yourself. Now, finally getting to the game's combat system. As I previously mentioned, it has using a variety of different weapons that all have different animations and buffs that make them useful in different situations. It also has using a bunch of different skills like grenades, turrets, and giant death balls. And all of this combines into a combat system that's very enjoyable to experience, though also simple at face value. But there are a lot of complex subtleties, and this is the reason why I didn't mention the combat until this point in the video. For example, the game has an element system that was added recently, and you can light oil with fire, freeze water, and electrify water. There are plenty of opportunities to use the oil effect, but unfortunately the other elemental effects are a bit underplayed, as there are less opportunities to use them. The next thing I would like to note is that the game utilizes Bloodborne's rally system. And in case you don't know what that is, basically when you get damaged, the lost part of your health bar turns yellow and slowly decreases to the amount of health that you now have. You regain this lost health by damaging enemies, and it drives a lot of the system's complexity and makes getting damaged less discouraging. Another way you regain health is by using health flasks, which you get at this skeleton guy who I like to call Mr. Bones. Yeah. This is also where you cash in your dead cells, similar to how you cash in souls, and refill your Estus flasks in Dark Souls. Oh, wait a sec, do I dare say that the game's combat is similar to that of a 2D Dark Souls? Oh my god, Sheeble, how dare you! Dead Cells is 2D Dark Souls confirmed! They're basically the same game! Unsubbed, reported, and disliked. Oh man, I hate myself, but in all seriousness, this is why I didn't mention combat until this point in the video, as I know that being similar to a Soulsborne title can often be a major turnoff for certain players, but they do share many traits like a similar healing system, parrying for extra damage, backstabs, plunging attacks, rolling. Souls and Cells are quite similar, and both have a lot of dying. Obviously I'm stretching it a little bit when I'm attributing parrying, rolling, and backstabs as Dark Souls mechanics, but I do think the comparison needs to be made, as the game is kind of an awkward love child between Dark Souls and Castlevania, even though the rally system is a Bloodborne thing, but shh. Now, even if being similar to a Soulsborne game is generally a turn-off to you, I still think you should try it out, as the combat is actually quite unique and doesn't feel identical to any Soulsborne title. I just wanted to point it out and make a joke about it, and the progression system is really rewarding, the combat system is addicting, and each hit you land feels really impactful. It's honestly one of my favorite combat systems in a roguelite game to date. So I guess by now I've made it fairly evident that I really enjoyed Dead Cells, considering I spent 25 hours for the review alone, and I'm sure I'll play a lot more, though I do want to note that the game is not flawless. It does have a couple bugs. For example, while collecting this footage, I crashed 2 or 3 times, but I am running a beta build of the game, and the game itself is in early access, so I guess it's understandable. They are patching things though, so that's good. I'd also like to note that since I started this review like 2 weeks ago, the game has already received 2 large updates, the Elemental update, which added the elemental effects that I previously mentioned, and the other update known as the Hello Darkness My Old Friend update, which added an entirely new area, which looks really rad by the way, and 2 new enemies. This really shows that the developers have huge dedication to making a genuinely great game. They're incredibly ambitious and they're already showing it. Hi, I really hope you all enjoyed this review / analysis / whatever. I spent a lot of time working on it and I'm pretty proud of it. I do plan on coming back and making another video on Dead Cells when the game is finished, though supposedly that's about a year down the road, so it's going to be quite a while before I make another one. The next review I'm making will be on Final Fantasy XV's episode Prompto. The DLC itself comes out today, and I hope to get the video out within a week. I really hope you all look forward to it, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much for watching.